Hello and welcome back to the opener series. This is a follow through for the debate that happened, the epic, monumental debate, the one of a kind debate that happened in English on April 23rd, 2022. And the topic was just like a week back, and the topic was very, very interesting. It was the Holy Bible or the Hindu Puranas, which is more scientific. And we were flooded, the channel, even my personal number and the chat screens are flooded with comments of congratulatory notes on the way the debate was done, the participants, the content, and it hosted a slew of queries online, a lot of discussions online, and we simply thought of doing a follow-up program. Now, this is not like a follow-up debate. Let me assure you, there were many said by people in the comment section where people were saying this was not covered or covered, and many follow-up questions were there. And to be honest with you, most of those questions were already thought of before the debate by Sakshi, and but unfortunately, due to request from the ISKCON panel, the number of rebuttals were dropped from 4 to 1, which led to a loss of content because there was not enough discussion on the points. And to that end, of course, let me start off with a word of appreciation for the ISKCON panel to have come for the debate where so many others absconded. Like the flag bearer of Hinduism in the West, there is Rajiv Malhotra, and of course his disciple Esther Dhanraj. In India, there is Agniveer and Neeraj Atri and a host of others. And we were very surprised when ISKCON themselves approached for a debate, and Sakshi graciously agreed to that. So, of course, it was a very enjoyable debate. I loved hosting it. And then, of course, with the host of queries, there came a lot of questions and answers, and people are posting their own answers. So the channel thought, and I thought that let us get the panelists back from Sakshi because many of those queries are pointed at Sakshi. And so today I have with me again Brother Jerry Thomas and Brother Praveen Pagdala. Welcome to the show, Praveen and Jerry. Good morning, brothers. How are you doing?
All well,
Thank you so much for being there.
Yeah, doing good. Thanks, Naren.
All right. So now coming to the key points, I'll jump directly into the content, brothers. And honestly speaking, I was following up and going to the comment section, and the one that I really struck me, and not just one, many on the same tone was, and I quote, you can see that in the channel: bring other high-rank ISKCON members and then see what happens. I mean, in the commentator must be speaking and referring to Siddharth. He is just a student still learning. Bring higher rank like Gopal Das. So brothers, a few of the Hindus were even saying that this was like uneven in the sense that perhaps Siddharth didn't know what he was talking about. I'm not saying that, but that's what a few people were commenting on. And so, brothers, what do you think? And when you agreed for this debate, would you agree that Siddharth is merely a student? If yes, then why would you debate with a student? What would you have to say to that? And again, guys, and Siddharth, if you're listening, I'm not saying that you're a student, or I'm not making any comments on that line. I'm merely reading the comments and asking the Sakshi team for a response on that. Yes, over to you, Sakshi.
Well, I'll go first. On the note of calling somebody like a student, and he produces a book which is released by a close ally or a close office bearer of Prime Minister himself, speaks of volumes. The reason I said that is it is a good thing to be a student of any book. Actually, whether it is a book or Puranas or Vedas. I think it's a compliment. I think it's a good thing to be a student rather than calling themselves the superheroes or the scholars, etc., etc. Neither Jerry nor myself or anybody in the panel today or in the future that represents Sakshi Apologetics Network consider themselves as the authority on Bible or authority on science or authority or any subject for that matter. We all consider ourselves students, and we want to be like that. We want to be learning, until the last day of our life. So, so Siddharth being a student is a great thing. At the same time, though he's a student, he did a good job. He did a very good job of writing a book. These so-called scholars did not produce one, and he boldly produced one, and that one was published and was accredited by or inaugurated by people who who represented Hindutva in India, who represented governments in India. So I think though he's a student, it is fine. Number one. Number two, as you rightly said, you and I and Jerry, along with many others in this Akshi Apologetics Network, we reached out to a lot of people, a lot of people who think themselves as scholars, people who represent Hindutva officially. I don't know what that means, but they claim that on their websites, on their blogs, on the social networks, etc. And you have approached them. I have approached them. Jerry approached them. Finney approached them. A lot of us actually approached them, and none of them turned for a discussion. And we are open for a discussion.
Incidentally,
Gopal Das.
Incidentally, Praveen, as you remember, they absconded.
Yeah, whether it is Gopal Das or anybody else, we are open for a discussion even today, right? Even Jerry and I or anybody else from Sakshi Apologetics Network are open for a discussion, whether it is a Sanskrit language-based discussion, whether it is an actual historical discussion, whether it is, the contribution of the Christian ideology to the India kind of discussion. What you pick, you get to choose the topic. And we are there to represent the Christian side of it. So, because Siddharth did a good job, while he did a good job, Jerry and I also very humbly, very very cordially, in a very very friendly way, we questioned him and we asked him for a detailed account of what he wrote. That doesn't qualify Siddharth to be a less scholar or a less a person with knowledge in his own books. So while taking that as a compliment, I also take that as a trick to dilute the person. I mean, that's the worst thing that you can do. We should all. I mean, this is what the Christian ideology teaches us. The Christian ideology teaches us to respect people who participate, respect people who propose their thought process, people who we respect them and we receive them the way they claim it to be, and we are there for a very friendly discussion. So instead of calling him names, instead of calling him weak, instead of calling him as a student, instead of calling him some less accredited kind of person, why don't we face the arguments? It's not about the person, but it's about the arguments that he brought, and it's about the counter propositions and the counter arguments that Jerry and I made. So that is where our focus should be, not on the person, not on how he did and how he did not do. It is true that there were a lot of points that Jerry and I could not attempt because of the lack of time, and at the same time Siddharth kind of did not attempt to answer a lot of questions that we raised, probably because of the lack of time, or probably because he don't have answers. We don't know that. We are waiting for him to come back for another discussion, and that is when we should evaluate how deep that person is in his subject. So I don't think Siddharth is a weaker opponent. I think he did his good job, his best job actually, by writing a book and also representing his book in those 35-40 minutes. As you rightly said, Naren, that it is not Sakshi Apologetics Network that reduced the time of rebuttals, time of presentation, time of question answers, time of cross questioning, time of taking questions from the audiences, etc. We were open for 4.5 to 5 hour debates. The original proposition was it starts at 4 o'clock in the afternoon India time, and it goes all the way up to 8.5 or 8 hours 30 minutes in the night, India time. But we had to sum up everything in 2 hours or 2 hours 20 minutes, or maximum by 2 hours 45 minutes. Keeping in mind all the breaks that we did. That probably reduced the time for both the panels, both the sides, to represent themselves in a fair and represent themselves with all the meticulous details that went into the debate or the discussion. So I don't agree with that comment. The comments are personal opinions, probably, but Siddharth did a good job. Siddharth presented himself well. And when we asked questions, probably there was very less time, and probably there was also he would want to come back with more details, and that's fine. That's how an academic discussion is done.
So just to add to what Praveen has said, no one can doubt the credentials of Siddharth. Siddharth, say formally, he is the director of ISKCON Michigan.
Yes.
So he is not a novice in that way. And as Praveen rightly pointed out, Vivek Dibroy, the chairman of India's Prime Minister's Council Economic Board, he is the one who released the book of Siddharth. If Siddharth is nobody, as the commentator, the guy who commented seems to indicate, why would Prime Minister's advisor release the book? And it's not that Siddharth is new to the debates. Siddharth has already debated with atheists. Anyone can go search in the YouTube Siddharth's debate, and they will see that Siddharth has multiple debates with the atheists. For example, debate with the Tom Jump, who claims to be an atheist philosopher, and with the James Fodder, who seems to be a William Lane Craig basher. So Siddharth has debated with all these people, and if you look at the comments of those videos, no one actually says that the Siddharth is a student. So it is only in this video that the people come and comment that Siddharth is a student. I wonder why they didn't comment that earlier. Because Siddharth is not, while Siddharth is a student, like all of us are lifetime students, that doesn't reduce the credentials of Siddharth at all. You can see many of the Siddharth's lectures. ISKCON themselves have hosted many lectures of Siddharth on this very same topic. So if ISKCON gurus have a problem with what Siddharth has stated in his book, why would they continue to host the programs with the Siddharth and give him a great appreciation? So I think none of those things reduces the credentials of Siddharth at all. Siddharth is, I would consider him as one of the best among the ISKCON scholars now. He wrote this book, and he came and presented in this book. But the book has like a lot of weaknesses, the arguments. I hope that he will go and rework on his arguments, and he will come back, because I guess we were able to highlight where he has missed. And I think he will relook at the entire his arguments and rework, and probably either he will discard or he will come up with the new arguments in the future. So it doesn't reduce the credentials of Siddharth at all.
Naren, you are not audible.
Sorry. Yes, I agree, brothers, that he did a good job, an extremely well-behaved and a gracious gentleman, and to that end, he did well in representing the Hinduism faith and presenting his points. So, for those who are watching the program, this is not like we are trying to put words into the mouth of Siddharth, or have another parallel or another part of the debate going on. This program, what you're watching now, is basically we are trying to pick up points where Sakshi could have elaborated more. All right, so it is not that we are trying to be unfair to Siddharth in this program. All right, so what I'm doing, brothers, is that firstly, okay, just to add to that comment made by a few of the Hindus who feel that Siddharth was probably not able to put his points across in a very clear manner. I've already volunteered a part 2 of the debate, and if Siddharth is interested, we can always have a part 2 of the same debate. Or if there are other Hindu scholars who would like to discuss with the Sakshi team on the similar topic, who consider themselves to be better than Siddharth, They are more than welcome to come forth for a discussion, and I'm sure that the Sakshi team would be more than happy to oblige. So, with that in mind, what I'm doing is that I've been through the entire debate a few times, and there are a few points that are outstanding or like open from Sakshi's side. So, I thought let me just volunteer it out to them again. So, brothers, are you ready for my
Yeah.
first ball of the inning? All right,
Yeah.
all right. In your introduction, guys, you mentioned that you'll be taking two different approaches, and this is a point that even Siddharth had picked up. So I just thought, let me ask you to elaborate on your fundamental construct. Is that you said that you'll be taking two different approaches to the Bible and the Puranas? Can you did elaborate it to some level in the introduction and all rebuttals and the Q&A level? In the introduction and all rebuttals and the Q&A, but can you make a coherent statement as to what do you mean by that and why? Why two different approaches for the Bible and the Puranas? Over to you.
Well, I did the presentation, the initial presentation part at the time of introducing ourselves to the audiences, and also to you, and also to Siddharth, obviously. The approach that we took is, number one, the Holy Bible is the paradigm giver of modern science. The reason we said that is, Bible is not written to be a science textbook, number one. Number two, when biblical authors wrote what they observed, they wrote in the regular common nomenclature, which simply means using the words of a common man to present what they observe. And also, the intention of writing the book, of the writing of the books of the Bible, all those 66 books of the Bible, is not to teach the science, but the writers of the book basically observed the physical phenomenon and wrote how it appeared to their naked eye, and also presented the representation of how God can intervene into this world and help human beings to achieve the primary purpose of writing this book. And the primary purpose of writing this book, as we claimed in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, is to reveal and teach God Himself and God's purposes to human beings, and purposes that Bible gives, the path that Bible gives to for the human beings to be truly human the way God created them. 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 16, as we quoted in the initial presentation, is for the righteous living which God intends human beings to be righteous. He wants human beings to be the way He created, in His own likeness and His own image, and also in His likeness and image is to observe this world and learn from this world, because it is the handcraft of God's creation. God created miraculously out of nothing. We call it ex nihilo. So that is number one. Bible never claims it to be a science book, number one. Number two, Puranic literature claims to be a book of science. The second argument that we brought, or the one argument, the second part of that we brought, is in Bhagavad Purana, book number 2, Adhyaya 10 says, as I recited in my initial presentation, Sri Shuka Uvacha. Shuka is asking, Atra sarvo visargasthanam poshanam mutayah manmantareshanukata nirodho muktirashrayah dashamasya. These 10 vishuddhayartham, this is the primary purpose of Bhagavata Purana. Bhagavata Purana is written to explain these 10 things. What are those things? Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshanam, Mutayam, Manvantara, Nirodha, Mukti, Ashraya, and then Navanamihi Lakshanam. 9 characteristics of this creation God of the Puranas wanted to explain in Puranas, which simply means He wants to explain His Virat Rupa, the personification of Himself in the creation is detailedly explained in these Puranas. All the Astadasha Puranas that we read, all the Astadasha Puranas that Siddhartha ji explained in his book or quoted in his book. For example, Bhagavata Purana, book number 2, after creation of human beings in the form of from head, from shoulders, from udara bhaga, and then from the legs, etc. Then he says bhulokatah kalpitah padbhyam, which simply means from the foot of the Virat Rupa of God Himself. Virat Rupa means, for the people who likes to hear it from in English, it is the manifestation of God's body in the form of universe. So Bhuvar Lokasya Nabitaha, from his navel Bhuvar Loka came up, and the Hridas Swaloka. Swaloka is from the Hrida part, which is the heart, the chest portion or the heart portion. Urasa Maharloko. Maharloka is from his Urasa. So basically, because Puranas claim to teach the science, claim to teach the creation in detail, manifestation of the Virat Rupa of God Himself. Number one, we wanted to observe Bible from its own standpoint of view. Number two, we wanted to observe Puranas from its own point of view. Because of that, we took this approach of looking at Bible the way it invites us to look it, and we look at the Puranas the way they invite us to look at it. So there is no double standard at all. If had it been the case that Bible also says that the purpose of Bible is to teach the creation, we would have delved into that in that way. But that is not the case. So does it mean in the following questions in the debate, we had questions in terms of the scientific data from the Bible, where Siddharthji brought up a couple of questions. We answered, which simply means we are not saying that Bible is erroneous or contradictory to the science. What we are trying to say is, where Bible is silent, we want to be silent. At the same time, where whatever details Bible gives, we want to use the science and bring in the light to see, so that the people can see that Bible is not contradicting the science at all. Science is slowly understanding what Bible very precisely says. Jerry very clearly quoted in his answering to the questions that raised by Siddharth, saying that the creation activity, especially in the time of Adam and Eve, that's the most precise one-liner or one sentence kind of explanation that the Bible gives, how human beings are created, how the creation is created in the first chapter of Bible itself. So that is where we stop, and that the data given by Bible, is it contradicting the scientific inventions or scientific discoveries, that the scientific community is bringing up? We see that there is no contradiction at all. So the initial presentation or the proposition from Christian side was very balanced, calling the Bible the way it calls himself, calling the Puranas the way they call themselves, and understanding them and evaluating them in their own light. So that is the approach that we took.
Yes, that's a great point, actually. So just to summarize what you're saying, in essence, Praveen, is that you are evaluating the Bible as per the standards that the Bible is set for itself as the objective of the Bible, and the Puranas based on the objective that the Puranas has set for itself in the Puranas itself. So that's a great point, great way of looking at it, and we should be fair in that. So coming to the next point, so after the initial presentation, both of you did your initial, opening statement. So coming to Siddharth's presentation, I'll maybe cover that later on, but Siddharth mentioned 3 data points on, scientific discoveries or scientific accurate data, and I'd asked Siddharth to elaborate on the calculations and all, and he said he'll do that in the rebuttal. So we'll come to that again. Now coming to the Sakshi presentation. Now, Praveen, in your statement that you just made, you mentioned something like called as a Virat Rupa, and you mentioned that a few times, right? And
yes.
So Praveen, Siddharth, correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't get the notion that he is. I didn't get the thought that he is accepting the Virat Rupa structure. So, can you shed some light? See, somebody like me, I'm not really very clear on what is the Virat Rupa, and why is it so significant for them, for the
Well,
for Hinduism or the Puranas?
yes, yes. So let me go ahead and show you a few books. You asked this question when we were in the debate also.
Yeah.
Why all these books? All these books, all the Astadasha Purana, which simply means all the Puranas put together, all the four itihasas, the historical books that the Hindu fraternity treats them as the history. Whether it is Mahabharata, whether it is Ramayana, etc., etc. All these are considered as, the fifth Veda. There are four Vedas, and the fifth Veda is Astadasha Purana and the Itihasas put together, or sometimes Prasthana Trayam, the three Prasthanas that they have. They put together becomes the fifth Veda. On all these fifth Veda, all the books in the fifth Veda claim that the universe is the mass manifestation of a living creature or living body or the living God himself. So, when we take that approach, all the celestial bodies, all the created planets, the solar system, the entire Akhanda Brahmanda, which is undivided Brahmanda, is a manifestation of God's body himself, or the God of the Purana body himself. That it is living, basically it is living, breathing organism. That is what the Puranas are presenting. Puranas are trying to tell us that the whole world is a living body of God himself, and taking that approach, the way Puranas says, is what Sakshi Apologetics Network truthfully stood for. The Puranic scholars, you take any Puranic scholar, right from middle ADs, which is starting from 700 AD, starting from 500 AD. 500 AD is very less, but we can go back up to 850,000, 1200, 1500 kind of AD, where the Puranas started to come out, and all of those books describe the world and the systems in the world and the social system in the society, all of that as a manifestation of God's body. So that is what the Virat Rupa is. If take, for example, the society of the human beings is classified into four primary parts: the head, the chest part, the thigh part, and the foot part. The head is Brahmana, the chest is Kshatriya, the udara, or the stomach and the thigh part is Vaishya, and the Shudra, or the leg part. Anybody that doesn't fall into this system are more or less in addition to the slippers, as slip-ons, as some kind of shoes that this body of Virat Rupa wears. That is the structure of the society itself. And in the mantra or the shloka that I recited just now, even the Bhuvarloka, the Swaraloka, the Maharloka are the parts of the body of this great God of Puranas. That is what the Puranas teaches. The reason, in my opinion, maybe Jerry can expound a little bit more on that. The reason, in my opinion, the Siddharth is not delving into that explanation as rest of the Puranic scholars are explaining it from the text, the reason is he is exposed to the scientific data, and he is aware that the universe is not breathing anymore. Universe is not a living being. Universe is not it doesn't have a consciousness in it of its own. And if he takes that, if he gives into that approach, then there is a lot of questions that can be raised on his book. For example, all the hyperdimensions goes away. All the the explanations of miracles go away. For example, when we gave an example of God intervening at the time of creating Eve from the body of Adam, It was a miraculous intervention of God, which we call it as a miracle. But taking Virat Rupa position, taking the position of Virat Rupa, there is no miracle. It can't be a miracle at all. From the Hindutva perspective, there cannot be any miracle, because everything that happens is miracle. Everything that happens is part of God's body itself. So when Siddhartha Chabra can go to appeal the miracle only if it is outside of the body, only when it is not Virat Rupa, and giving it or spiritualizing the Virat Rupa explanation, not the physical or not the actual or real interpretation of Virat Rupa explanation as any other scholar of Puranas give. So that is the reason I think Siddharth is going away from that particular interpretation, as everybody else other than Siddharth that I know of, the Puranic scholars, they reside or they go to that explanation, and he's not going to that explanation, probably because he wanted a miracle in place.
So just to add to what Praveen has said, I'll give it in two parts. Why the Virat Rupa structure is important, and why the Virat Rupa structure is not a symbolic one. To refresh the first point, which I had already covered in the presentation, in our presentation, see, Virat Rupa structure is symbolic. If you want, go on giving the distance from, say, the thigh to the chest, and between, like, from the earth which is in the stomach, and the sun and the moon which comes in the chest, you want give the distance. But whereas precise distance, directions are all, and the order and all are given in the Bhagavad Purana. Now you can't take those exact numbers as symbolic. That being one, denying the Virat Rupa structure, in my opinion, is almost equal to completely discarding the Bhagavad Purana. Now, why do I say that? Unless you have the Virat Rupa structure, which Brother Praveen very clearly explained, the anatomy of the God, the head, the shoulders, the stomach, and the thigh, you cannot have many of the incarnations. You will have to, if avatars will go for a toss if you don't accept Virat Rupa structure. Let me give you two examples. You know, Varaha Avadara, the Avadara of the swine or the pig, which everybody knows that when the earth was immersed in the water. Now, how can earth be immersed in the water and the Varaha Avadar comes? It is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, book number 3, chapter 13. It says the Varaha Avadar came and lifted up the earth from the water. Now, the globe that we know, the planet Earth that we know, it is cannot be immersed in the water. It can be covered in the water, and the water can recede to the land. That is the way that the Bible explains in Genesis chapter 8. Water is receded. It is not lifting up from the water. Now, lifting up the water comes from that imagination that water is at the earth is at the stomach, and below the earth, towards the thigh, there is an ocean, and the Asura came and immersed the earth. And hence, Varahavadara comes and lifts up the earth, this flat earth, the Puranic earth, which is there floating on the ocean, it is lifted up. You see, if you deny Virat Rupa structure, you will have to deny Varahavadar also. Now, not just Varahavadar, to ensure that such things doesn't happen in the future, the thousand-wood serpent, Ananda, the entire Brahmanda is now kept in the head of the thousand-wood serpent. Why? Because again, this immersion should not happen. If it is a planet Earth that is on an empty space, why we should be even worried about that? That is another point. And again, all of us know the Vamana story. Vamana, if you go back and read the Vamana story in the Bhagavad Purana, you will again see, for example, Srimad Bhagavatam, book number 8, chapter 20. When you go there and see, how does Vamana makes his footsteps? The first step is actually on these three words, see, and then he lifts us up. While he lifts us up, and he put the feet on the most uppermost loga, the loga, that is the head part. He is going up to the shoulder part from the stomach. He is lifting up his head, leg and holding it. If the Virat Rupa structure is denied, Vamanavadar also goes into toss. Because how can Vamanavadar goes into, you can accept without the Virat Rupa structure. Again, when Vamanavadar lifted up his leg, this leg, the thumb of the foot went and created a hole, and that is how the water from the moon started flowing down, 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 and became as a Ganga. So even considering Ganga as holy, you need the Virat Rupa structure. I'm just giving a few examples. Without the Virat Rupa structure, Varahavadar is not there. Ananda doesn't make sense. Vamanavadar goes for a toss. Even whether Ganga is holy or not is a questionable thing. So the entire, as I said, the entire Hindu beliefs, the Avadar concepts, the holy rivers, all of them are woven together to the Virat Rupa structure. So if you deny the Virat Rupa structure, it is as good as completely discarding the Bhagavad Purana itself, which no true Hindu should be ever will be acceptable to him. So it is not us who should be questioning Siddharthi on that. It is the other Puranic Hindus who should be questioning, because he is denying the Avadar concept itself. So I'll just to add to what Brother Praveen has said. So Virat Rupa structure is an essential feature of the Bhagavad Purana. It is not symbolic, and it has to be accepted literally because of the distance and because of the pastimes which are called as the Avadars. Makes sense only within the Virat Rupa.
Yeah, I don't. Let me also, add one slightest point, and that is, had there been Luke, the opponent that we were expecting to have, he in his articles, he in his blogs on astrology and the science, he clearly says that the universe is Virat Rupa of God. It is a breathing organism of God. So there are, anybody can go and see on his blog. It is very clearly written, and he says the astrology that Hinduism proposes makes sense because God's manifestation of His body in the form of universe is real. So yes, that's what it is.
Well, thank you, brothers, for a wonderful elaboration. Now, a few points for the viewers. First of all, this is an academic discussion, and this is not meant to offend anybody's feelings. If you are of the type, or till now, if you're feeling any of your sentiments being offended, then I would suggest you to get better, stronger sentiments, or just stop watching this program. This is just a discussion on what the debate earlier was all about. It was not meant for hurting anybody's sentiments. And on the other side, I would like to say that in case you do not agree with the thoughts and the arguments presented by the other two panelists from Sakshi, you are welcome to propose your own scholars to come forth for a discussion. Again, this is meant for creating a better understanding across various religions. As you can see from the tone, it was not meant for offending anyone. All right. So this is not a theological like a discussion on any of these topics, or trying to put Siddharth's words in Siddharth's mouth. And towards one more point I would like to say is that please, if you're enjoying this discussion, please do share this link with your friends and contacts. Let them also get learned and acquainted with what Hinduism means and what Christianity is all about and how things flow. So thank you again, panelists, for that answer. And now my next point is what I was thinking is that, see, the topic of the debate was Holy Bible or Hindu Puranas, which is more scientific. But what I observed is that the entire discussion was limited only to astronomy. Science is so many other things. There is biology, physics, math, so many other, arms are there of science. But you are limited to just astronomy and some parts of cosmology. So why was that, guys? And why didn't you go into other areas?
So let me begin by giving a brief response. One, we are primarily limited. It's not that we completely limited ourselves to astronomy, but we
Yes.
primarily focused on astronomy. The reason number one is Siddharthi has been focusing on the astronomy and the date. So we thought that if we go into the other subjects and Siddharthi speaks on one subject, the audience will not be able to compare. That was one reason. Second, the reason was when we are speaking about the paradigm, modern paradigm, or the paradigm for the modern science, the modern science in its beginning was mainly focused on the astronomy or the physical science as we know. The biology and all comes later. So when we are speaking about the origin of the modern science, we will have to focus more. It is not that that was the only part, mechanics is another part, but we will have to focus more on the astronomy. So because Siddharthi's book is on astronomy, and the second reason, our argument for the modern science, the paradigm for the modern science is also majorly related to astronomy. We have focused on the astronomical part. That was the only reason. Apart from that, as Praveen had rightly mentioned that day, he had a lot and lots of say materials on the other subjects. Am I right?
Yes, yes. For example, I mean, I spoke about geology. I spoke about. I mean, I wanted to actually. I wanted to speak about the embryology. I wanted to speak about the medicine. For example, Atharva Veda Samhita is full of medicine. Atharva Veda Samhita is basically medicine. So we wanted to talk about medicine. We wanted to talk about a lot more science from the Hindu scriptures. Had there been time, had there been agreement from both sides, had there been no corona for Luke, had there been, given the situation, we had to limit ourselves, but we are not limiting ourselves to astronomy alone. Astronomy is the part where Siddharth is strong at. It will be strawmanning Siddharth because he's making one point and we are bringing another point, and bringing another point doesn't discredit this point at all. So that is more of a logical error called strawman. So we wanted to address and give full time, full explanation and full opportunity to Siddharth. We wanted to steelman, basically. We wanted to consider our opponent as the eminent. We wanted to consider our opponent as able and intelligent, and based on his data, we wanted to continue the discussion while not other spheres or other areas of the science. So we brought in a little bit of geology, especially the geology that Siddharth quoted in his book. From the books that he quoted, we brought up the geology. Given had there been time, we would have definitely brought more points. And today, if there is time, we can also bring more points.
Well, yeah, thanks for that. Okay, now for the sake of the audience, I would like to mention one thing is, Brother Praveen and Brother Jerry also mentioned somebody called as Luke. Well, for those who are not aware, if you've not watched the debate, first of all, if you've not watched the debate, please do watch it. It's hosted on Sakshi Apologetics Network, YouTube, and also on Rakshana TV YouTube channel. You have to see that before you can catch up on what's being discussed here. Now, Luke was the second panelist from ISKCON. He has a well-known site on astrology. And what he mentioned regarding the Virat Rupa that Luke takes for granted and accepts is mentioned on his blog site, on his website by Luke Wenderleben. I'm sorry, I hope I got the name right. Luke was the second panelist from ISKCON. So we really hope that perhaps the next time he'll be there, and maybe he can support Siddharth on defending the Virat Rupa. And again, I'm saying if any of the Hindu viewers do not agree with the interpretation, they are more than welcome to present other scholars to take this up on. Okay, now Jerry, quite a few times in your presentation you mentioned something called as the Bhagavad Purana Bhagavatam quite a few times, and quite a few references. Even now when you spoke you are referring to that. So why is there so much emphasis on these two Puranas, and there are like dozens more? So why focusing more on these two Puranas only? I'm not saying that you haven't quoted anyone else, but why the Bhagavad Purana and the Bhagavatam? Jerry.
Yeah. Uh, there are several reasons. One of them being, say, again, for Siddharth, as Praveen rightly mentioned, we wanted to give the maximum respect to our debate opponent, Siddharth. And for Siddharth, Bhagavatam is the main text. It is in the Bhagavatam Purana that you will see that the ISKCON, for example, for them it is considered like Bible, the supreme text of all. And second, they are not without a reason in doing that. ISKCON has a good reason to consider Bhagavatam as above every other book. Because if you look at the book number 1, in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, it speaks about Vyasa Maharshi. Vyasa Maharshi is feeling a little disappointed after combining the Vedas, after combining the Upanishads. He feels that something is still missing. And then he realizes, while he has spoken about the Vedas and the Upanishads, he hasn't spoken about God himself, the Hindu God himself. And he knows that this is the missing. So again, if you go to the Luke's website, Luke, who was supposed to, who had to be there in the debate, you will see an article, Bhagavata Purana, the crown of the Vedas. Because it is the Bhagavata Purana that is the final of the entire Vedic literature. Because it is only in the Bhagavad Purana you have a clear genealogy, history of the gods, the avatars of the Hinduism itself. So ISKCON, for very good reason, they consider Bhagavata Purana above all the other texts. And because our panelist was the ISKCON member, we had taken it. And even if ISKCON panel member was not there, because Bhagavata Purana itself makes that claim that it is the supreme text above every other text, or it is the crown of all the Vedic literature, I think our focus would have been more towards the Bhagavata Purana, while we consider all the other Puranas also into our consideration. So these two reasons. One, Bhagavata Purana itself claims that it is the crown, and ISKCON accepts that claim, and our panel member was an ISKCON. Then, hence, we primarily focused on the
our intention, Naren, is always not to evade from the actual subject and actual books that our opponents take and go into some other books and some other, confuse them with some other books, bombard them with the information from other books. No, that's not our intention. Our intention is very plain, very sincere, very clear, and very humble. And that is, the book that he claims to be the crown, the book that he uses the most book. If you can take Siddhartha's book and look at all the Puranas that he quoted, Bhagavata Purana and Bhagavatam are the ones that he quotes the most. And after that comes all, the Padma or the Garuda and Brahma Vaivarta, etc., Puranas. But mainly he quotes and mainly he deals his subject from Bhagavata Purana. That is the reason we took it.
That's a great way, guys. And again, I would encourage everyone to look at the tone in which this debate was done. And I was not aware of this point. I'm not a Hindu scholar, so I was not aware. So I appreciate the Sakshi team for giving so much respect that Siddharth and ISKCON truly deserve for coming on this show and representing their point. So again, kudos to Sakshi team for that point. Okay, now coming back to the previous question on the bent toward of this particular discussion. So from the comments, the tons of comments that I see online, a few of the Hindus were basically commenting was that the Puranas would do much better. These are the people who thought that Siddhartha really didn't do well in the debate, and they were of the opinion that perhaps, or not perhaps, they're saying that okay, Puranas would do much better in other subjects, and if this debate had been on other subjects, then Puranas would come out on top. So, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think they have the choice to choose the subject. We did not give the subject to Siddhartha either. It is Siddhartha that proposed a few subjects, and we took one of them. if there are people that want to propose more subjects, let them come forward. Write an email to us. Our email addresses are available in public. We can post our email address in the comment box of this video. You can approach us, and whatever subject, it can be science, it can be theology, it can be political science, it can be philosophy, it can be psychology, it can be, you choose, and we are there to represent the Christian side. And that is not to put down any other worldview, but to have a meaningful discussion. Where do we get the paradigm for the human beings to live a better life? Where do we get the paradigm for the human beings to understand God? Where do we get the paradigm to get the science? Where do we get the paradigm to get a better society, a better invention model, a better discovery possibilities? All of that is definitely something that we want to discuss.
That's well said. That's well said. And to this, I'd say 2 points. First is that the email address of Sakshi Apologetics Network is sakshi.apologeticsnetwork@gmail.com. I repeat, sakshi.apologeticsnetwork@gmail.com. Do drop in a line and let's see how these things happen. Now, coming to the rebuttals. First of all, is that Siddharth made an interesting point that I really wanted to hear. Now, see, this is what this discussions are all about, to learn something. And even though I am a very ardent student of learning various worldviews, I didn't know so many things that the panelists spoke about. And so all the people who are listening, I really request you to look at it with an open mind and see what can be learned and gleaned from this discussion. So now, Praveen, you said in your presentation that you just made that about the Puranas and commentaries from say 500 AD, 800,000, 1200 AD and stuff. But in the presentation that our dear friend Jerry made, our dear friend Siddharth made, he mentioned a timeline of 5,000 years. The Puranas are 5,000 years. And being in India, I keep on hearing these things quite often. That is, the Puranas are thousands of years old, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000, people make up these numbers. So what is the base for these numbers? If you can elaborate or give me some thought on that. I have no idea. Over to you.
Yeah. Well, I actually congratulate you on that point, because a lot of people, I've been hearing that it is lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of years away. But you have
old, lakhs of years old.
Lakhs of years old, or lakhs of years away that these books were written, etc., etc. And I actually want to congratulate Siddharth, because he made progress. He made progress to a more realistic number of 5,000 years, which in my opinion is not a realistic number. The reason being, for example, in the 4th century to 4th to 5th century AD, there was a guy called Vasubandhu, and that Vasubandhu was criticized, in Brahma Sutra, and thus Brahma Sutra was also, and Vasubandhu and his Brahma Sutra related information was criticized in Gita, and in Gita, the Bhagavad Purana brings up that issue of Vasubandhu and refutes the idea that Vasubandhu gives, and it is very clearly dated that it is 4th to 5th century AD, which is after after the dominion of Jesus Christ. Basically, when even way much after the Greeks invaded India. So the maximum they go to Vedas, not leave about Puranas. Maximum they go to get the Vedas is about maybe like 500 BC. Maximum, that to Maukika, which simply means in verbal format. The reason being, the Archaeological Survey website of India simply says that the letters or the linguistic, the written form of Sanskrit is available only after 120 AD, 130 AD, 150 AD, 200 AD, and before that there was no Sanskrit at all. Though even if it was there, it was in Maukika form, or it is in the reciting format. So, if we take Pali as the language of India that Buddha and others spoke and wrote their literature in, and Buddha also mentions about, Gautama Buddha said, Siddhartha, Siddhartha Buddha, basically the founder of Buddhism, if we take him as the reference point and he recites some of the, or he brings up the caste system that is available in Veda, and he is, maximum we can go is 3 BC or 4 BC, then there is no point of, going 5,000 years ago kind of explanation, because there is no written documentation evidence that is available even for Vedas. We all agree, even Siddharth agrees, that Puranas are after Vedas. And Vasubandhu lived in 4th to 5th century. So it cannot be, all these Puranas, including especially the Bhagavata Purana, can never be written before Vasubandhu, which is 4th to 5th AD, wherein, all the invasions from the West already happened, invasions from the Roman Empire happened, invasions from the Greek Empire happened, invasion, the Vartaka Vyapara, which simply means the trades and the businesses between the Egypt, the Mediterranean, and the and the European continent has always been there. And also we also have a lot of evidence these days about the migration of this particular people called Bharata, who spoke Sanskrit dialect, which is an offshoot of the Indo-European languages that comes from the Central and the Middle Eastern areas of the Asia. So it doesn't match. The numbers doesn't match. Before to the point that you made before, Jerry was talking about the exact numbers when we talk about the Virat Rupa of God himself. Those numbers cannot be Virat Rupa. Those numbers cannot be figurative, is what he said. And I want to go back to that numbers again. He can't just pick and choose. Cherry picking doesn't work. Either you have to stick to the scientific approach, or you go to the non-scientific or extra scientific approach. You can't mix the both. If you want to go with the scientific approach, then it is not 5,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago that these books were written. Maximum we can go based on the scientific dating, based on the archaeological evidences, based on the not paleontological evidence, and within the archaeological evidences, the constructions within the Indian subcontinent. Maximum we can go is to 4 AD, 5 AD, and for the Vedic period we can go to maximum 500 to 600 BC. Or even if you discount it, it can be 1000 BC, not before that.
Well said, Praveen. Actually, I'd read about the ASI and the Archaeological Society of India and their article and the posting that there is literally no evidence of Sanskrit before 1 AD, and even on the Ashoka pillars and the dialects which was found in the archaeological evidence, there is nothing. Anyway, so
you can find Tamil. You can find Tamil. You can find Aramaic.
Tamil is the oldest language. Yeah, Tamil is one of the oldest languages in the world.
You can find Aramaic. You can find, for that matter, even Greek. But not Sanskrit. Not Sanskrit.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just to add, it's an interesting thing that the great Emperor Ashoka, when he issued the edicts, the rock edicts and all, the languages that were there in Arabic, Greek, but not in Sanskrit. So if Sanskrit was a language available for writing at the time of Emperor Ashoka, why would he write it in Greek and miss out on Sanskrit?
And one small point, Jerry, before you move ahead, I wanted to mention is, based on the Puranic and the Vedic cultures, Kshatriyas, which Ashoka is basically, Kshatriyas can recite and can read Sanskrit, and they are allowed to read Sanskrit.
And also I want to make an interesting observation by a Hindu guru in Kerala. He lived, say, in 1853 to 1924. His name is Chattabi Swami. So he was a great apologist for Hinduism. But in this point, whether the Sanskrit is the oldest language or not, he made a very interesting point, because Samskrita, he says, is you understand, like the word itself, Prakida and Samskrita. Samskrita is kind of cultured. You actually, out of the Prakida, you make the things which are derived out of it. So the Prakida should come first, and then the Samskrita, which is taken out of the Prakrita, should come. This is his argument. Adi Bhasha is his book that is written, and he was a critic of Christianity also. Just to give the complete picture, and then he says Tamil would be the Adi Bhasha, and then other Prakrits would have come, and only at a later stage the Hindu Guru says Sanskrit could have come. Now he is closer to the historical truth than any of this others who say 5,000 years and all. And to add to the Idihasas, for example, Mahabharata mentions about the Roman coin denarius. So Mahabharata could have been written only when the Roman coin denarius was there. Now Bhagavad Purana comes after the Idihas. Now when Bhagavad Purana comes after the Idihas, it could have been written only after the Romans. So that is why I would agree 100% with Praveen that it would be written somewhere around AD 500, not much before that. And Praveen had already mentioned about the Vasubandhu being refuted or mentioned, referenced in the Bhagavatam. So Bhagavatam could have been written only after Vasubandhu.
Even the Itihasas mention Yavanas. Yavanas are simply Greeks. Yavanas are Greeks. So Greeks invaded India not 5,000 years ago, not 50,000 years ago, not lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of years ago. They invaded India in 3 BC or by 4 BC, maximum 5 BC. So there is no point, there is no way that Seleucus would have lived 50,000 years ago from now. There is no way that, Alexander would have lived 50,000 years ago from now or 5,000 years ago from now. Yavanas or Greeks, Shakas or the Shaka dynasty is from Greek dynasty. It's a mixture of the Greeks and the Indo-Greekan dynasties. Basically, there is a lot of history that can go into it, but yeah, these Puranas can never be before 580.
Thank you for that answer again. And again, for my viewers, this is not meant to hurt anyone. And if you have any scholars, please do send forth. Please do write into Sakshi Apologetics, and we can take it ahead from there. I can work with Rakshana channel for the debate on that. And if Siddharth, my friend, if you do not agree with what the Sakshi team has said, we can pick it up in part 2 of the debate. This was not meant to undercut your presentation in any manner. So please, I hope you are not offended in any way. So coming to the next point, guys, actually at the end of the presentation, opening presentation by Siddharth, I asked him for some calculations as to how did he arrive at the 3 things, that he said of the numerous things that is predicted in, or rather mentioned in the Puranas. One is the age of the universe, life of the sun, and the third is the permic extension, the timeline. So now I believe that was in slides 7, 8, and 9 of his presentation. So Jerry or Praveen, perhaps one of you can just elaborate on those verses, and if you can explain to me, honestly speaking, I have no idea, and so is the rest of my audience, is that how did those references that Siddharth has given lead to the calculation? Because I believe that he has done something in the book. So can you give me some idea on the calculation, please?
Yeah, I will take up this question. So let me begin, narrate. We'll have to first understand what is the Puranic calculation and what is the innovation that Siddhartha has added to the Puranic calculation, which he himself admits in the books that these are his discoveries or his findings, which no other scholar has found before him. So what is the traditional Puranic calculation? Let us look at that. All of us know that there are 4 yugas. Now, Kali yugas, say calculation is say 4,32,000 years. Now, it's very easy to think about the others. The Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, Kirta Yuga, it is 1:2:3:4. Whatever is the Kali Yuga's number, that is 4,32,000. You multiply it by 2, then you will get Dwapara Yuga. And 3 times of it is the Treta Yuga, and 4 times of it is the Kirta Yuga. So that is how 1:2:3:4, or if you come from Kirta Yuga, it is 4:3:2:1. 1 being the basic unit, that is the Kali Yuga. If you add all these things, 4 yugas together, I am coming actually, because you need to understand the Mahayuga actually, that is 4 million years, or 40 lakhs 43 lakhs 20,000 years would be the one Mahayuga. Now this is mentioned in the Brahmanda Purana, section 2, chapter 29. Once we understand that the Mahayuga is 43 or 4 million years, now you start calculating the years of Brahma. I'll explain later also why the years of Brahma is important, because from the years of Brahma you get the years of universe. Now Bhagavad Gita 8:17 says 1 day of Brahma lasts 1,000 such cycles of Mahayuga. He calculated 43 lakhs 20,000 years as one Mahayuga. You multiply it to 1,000. That we will get the 1 day of Brahma. Now Bhagavad Gita also adds that is 1 day, not taken as 24 hours, but day as in day when the sun is there. Now 1 night of Brahma is equal to the 1 day. So whatever you get by multiplying 4 million into 1,000, you have to add that, take as that as the day, and plus the night also you will have to add it. So that will become 1 day and 1 night of Brahma. Now Brahma's age, 1 year would be Brahma's 1 year. We have taken 1 day and 1 night of Brahma. You will have to multiply it by 360. So anybody can pause this video, take a paper or a calculator and do the same calculation that I am saying. Multiply it into 360, you will get the number of what the ages of the Brahma in 1 year of Brahma is equivalent to how many human years you will get it. Now that is 1 year. But it goes on to say that Brahma lives in Bhagavad Purana, book number 3, chapter 11. It says Brahma goes on to live like such 100 years. So finally you will have to multiply it by 100. So that will be a huge number. It is 311.4 trillion years, not billion, trillion years. So that is the complete age of the Brahma. So Brahma's age is equal to the age of the universe. Why? Because for every universe there is a one Brahma, and with the dissolution of that universe, the Brahma also disappears and the new Brahma and the new universe comes. So this is the traditional calculation. Now we are also told in Bhagavad Purana, book 3, chapter 11, that 50 years of Brahma has passed it, already completed. So it is very easy to calculate the age of the universe as per the Bhagavad Purana. You divide 311 by 2. It's simple calculation. Anybody can calculate. It is 155.52 trillion years. So as per the Bhagavad Purana and as per the other Puranas, the age of the universe should have been 155 trillion years. Now, how did Siddharji convert this 155.52 trillion years, which is accepted by the Puranic scholars, into 13.8 billion years? So Siddharji himself in his book, page 7, says a unique contribution of Siddharji's book is that he discovered that after the 50th year of Brahma, the entire universe gets disintegrated, and then there is a recreation happening. So by this so-called discovery of that he quoted from Vayu Purana, that is book 2, part 2 actually, chapter 38, verse 240. He quotes the sloka from there, and he gives his own translation. But if you take any other Puranic scholars' translation, that is not clear. Now I am not going to question either the Siddharji or the Puranic scholars on the translation. It is up to them to decide which is the translation, which is correct. But if you look at the entire context, can you remove this 155 trillion years? That is where I had questioned him. If you look at the dissolved, how the universe is dissolved in the description of the Vayu Purana, the entire element is not going to be dissolved. Now this is one. Siddharji assumes that after the 50th year, the entire universe has dissolved. The matter has gone into cease to exist. Hence he removes that 155 trillion years. Now removing 155 trillion years is good. You have already removed 155 trillion years, so solved one problem. Now how do you get 13.8 billion years? Because if you start with calculating 1 day, you will not again get it. There the Siddharthi again says he has discovered something new in the Puranas again. He says every other scholar had overlooked that there is a Sandhya between the night, there is a gap, there is a period between the dissolution and the day of the Brahma, the recreation, and he has added a new period between this dissolution and the creation starting, in the sense the day, not the creation, the day beginning. So that is again his interpretation. So you have already two points with Siddharthi differs from all the other Purani scholars who have existed till now. Now, this also doesn't solve the problem. So Siddharthi comes with the third interpretation, saying that because this doesn't solve the problem, because the Brahmanda that is mentioned in the Purana, if you go only by the Brahmanda, you will still not get this calculation. So Siddharthi redefines the Brahmanda. So he comes with the three novel interpretations: one, to remove the 155 trillion years; second, to add certain period in the creation; and third, to reinterpret what is Brahmanda. So this is, for me, it doesn't look like a straightforward calculation at all. Straightforward calculation would take us to 155 trillion years. Now, where we have pointed out to Siddharthi is not on the translation part. As I said, context we pointed out one. And said, Siddharthi, the context doesn't say a complete dissolution. It actually speaks about the water being rising. How can the water exist then the matter has not ceased to exist? So we have pointed out that contextual problem. Now, if he wants to dismiss that contextual problem, we are still fine with that. We are again a problem in Siddharthi's reinterpretation of the third point, which I said, Brahmanda as the solar system, wherein we pointed out the Puranas very clearly states Brahmanda has sun and other stars. Stars also is there. If Brahmanda is solar system, how come there are stars? That is another question. We were questioning the third assumption of the Siddharthi. Now, if Siddharthi wants to dismiss that, he can dismiss that as well. Though I find it very strange that how will anybody explain the stars, other stars existing in the solar system, if Brahmanda is interpreted as the solar system. Now, the other challenge that we have posed to Siddharthi was, see, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who lived, I think, around in the 12th century and all, he very clearly said, one universe, one Brahma can only rule, or he rules only one universe. If Siddharthi's interpretation is correct, he is rejecting the complete Guru tradition of ISKCON, which believed that one Brahma rules only one universe. Because if it is a new universe created after the 50th year, the same Brahma is ruling two universes. I hope I am making it, because Siddharthi, the first Puranic calculation is very clear. Siddharthi's interpretation is actually kind of twisting the entire Puranas themselves. Then we also pointed out, if entire matter ceased to exist, the time also should have ceased to exist. Because time, as per the science, general relativity theory, can exist only when the matter exists. If the matter ceases to exist, if the elements of the universe cease to exist, then the time also would cease to exist. If the time ceases to exist, how can Brahma exist? Because Brahma is part of the matter and the time. Brahma is part of the cosmic egg. If the entire universe ceases to exist, then Brahma itself cannot exist. This is why the traditional scholars have never gone into the line of Siddharthi. But Siddharthi has overlooked all these theological and scientific problems in order to arrive at 13.8 billion years by assuming at least three different things which no other Purani scholar has interpreted until now. So that is how Siddharthi gets 13.8 billion years. And as I said, solar system calculation, which is Siddharthi's second point, he arrives at by the redefining again the same assumption he carries forward to solar system, saying that solar system is only Brahmanda equals to solar system, which we have challenged Siddharthi, saying that the Puranas doesn't say that Brahmanda has stars, other stars. How can you clearly dismiss the clear text of the Puranas which says that the stars exist? So that calculation also has a challenge. And the third calculation, which is more or less a straightforward calculation, is the 251 million years ago, the flood. But the only problem that we found was that 251 million years ago, that flood was there, and it was the avatar, Matsya avatar was to save the Brahmins and the cows in a boat. 251 million years ago, Siddharthi cannot take the data and dismiss the boat part and the Brahmin part and the cow part. Did Brahmins, cow and boat exist before 251 million years ago? Is there any science which says that? So first two data points of Siddharthi are clear, in my opinion, humble opinion. They are clear twisting of the text and adding data points which there exist no data point. The third seems to be to me a lot more straightforward calculation, but that also can be taken as a scientific only if you dismiss the clear description of that flood that is happening.
Wow, guys, I really loved that, and there was so much to learn, so much, because honestly speaking, I couldn't understand the calculation. Please excuse my ignorance on that, and I really wish that Siddharth would have, answered my query in the rebuttal by explaining it himself. And again, Siddharth, if you think that the Sakshi team has misinterpreted your data or misrepresented your data, I am more than happy to look forward to a part 2 of this debate. And I'm sure that, as you mentioned, there'll be, we can look forward to so many other theological debates as well. So to my audience, let us keep this in our prayers and keeping our fingers crossed that the other future debates happen, and they happen soon. Well, thanks again to the Sakshi team for their explanation on these three events and these three data points. Now, he mentioned something about hyperdimensions, and honestly speaking, I couldn't understand that, as I'm sure that you might have. So can you give me some data or some explanation as to what is this hyperdimension that he mentioned to, and how this ties up to his overall calculation and the significance thereof? Because again, guys, for the audience, why all these questions? See, the point is we should have had at least 3 to 4 rebuttals. We should have given ample time to both the sides to explain their point. Now, since that didn't happen, there are all these open areas that the people are discussing, and I'm also, wondering what happened and what happened to all those data points. So, to my next point, what is the hyperdimension that Siddharth mentions? Over to you.
Yeah, I will take this question also. As he explained, a dimension, length is a dimension, breadth is another dimension, height is another dimension. So these are 3 dimensions of the space that we are living. Now,
excuse me, Jerry, one sec. Can you start off by explaining what is the significance of this hyperdimension to his overall, predictions, as it is said in the Puranas, or this calculation in the Puranas? So where does this hyperdimensions fit in? Then we can get into how we came into that, please.
Yeah. So, for example, we had raised from Bhagavad Purana, book number 5, chapter 21. I'm giving the context why he has to come up with the hyperdimension. We have said that the Earth's circumference, which is mentioned in the Puranas, is 6 billion kilometers. 6 billion kilometers. Whereas the actual Earth's circumference is only 40,075 kilometers. So where is 6 billion and where is 40,000? So in order to explain the remaining part of the circumference, he says, this is just an illustration of what is covered in this book itself. He says the rest of the earth are hyperdimensional. Now, when he says the rest of the earth are hyperdimension, or as we rightly we pointed out earlier, where were the Brahmins and the cows and the goat? He could have said, as per his interpretation, those are in hyperdimension. Now, the problem with that is, see, for example, let us take the earth, which he covers it's in book and calls it as hyperdimension. He has covered it in his talk also and called it as hyperdimension. In other talks, not in the debate. The clear descriptions, as I said, a dimension is length, breadth, and height are 3 dimensions. And above the 3 dimension, people consider time as the 4th dimension. Apart from that, we can't imagine a dimension. Just as a creature, if the creature lives in 2 dimensions, that is only length and breadth, that creature can never look up or down because the height is not there. And you cannot explain the creature what is a height. Just like that, we who are in these 4 dimensions, we cannot imagine beyond the 4 dimensions. Now, whether can this explanation, the hyperdimensional explanation, fit the Puranic description is the question. So here I want to add, which Brother Naren though didn't raise, with Siddharthi covered. Siddharthi kept on saying that the scientists have agreed with the hyperdimension, scientists have agreed with the hyperdimension. I fully agree with the scientist. I have no problem, absolutely no problem with the hyperdimensions at all. We have a problem whether the Puranic description fits with the hyperdimension. When we say we have no problem with the hyperdimension, it is not just we are saying for the argument's sake. As we would try to point out, for hyperdimension is used for Trinity. The English mathematician Reverend John Wallis in the 17th century, in the second letter concerning Trinity, he has used the hyperdimension. Similarly, as we have pointed out in AD 1884, Anglican priest Reverend Edwin Abboud used the hyperdimension concept and written a mathematical fiction. C.S. Lewis has used the hyperdimension to explain Trinity. So we have absolutely no problem with the hyperdimension. What we have a problem is the Puranic description only fits, it's perfectly fits within the 3 dimension because it says the length, breadth, and the height of the Puranic, the earth, very clearly. North, south, east, west, up, down. That is the clear description. Now, when you are saying it is in 3 dimension, it is not, another dimension is not there. We are speaking in the same dimension. How can Siddharthi apply hyperdimension to the 3 dimensional space that is mentioned in whether it is the Akti Purana or Bhagavad Purana or any of the Puranas? How can Siddharthi says this 6 billion kilometers is the rest of the 40,000 out of the scientific 40,000 earth circumferences, kilometers of the earth circumferences, remaining of the 6 billion are in hyperdimension? How does it fit? Because the Puranas clearly says length, breadth, and height. It is 3 dimension. It is an error. It is absolutely an error. Hyperdimension doesn't come at all. Hyperdimension would be beyond the length, breadth, and height. Siddharthi doesn't seem to get that. Now Siddharthi says the rest of the distance we cannot see. No. If you are in a flat land, you can see the length and the breadth. You can definitely see the length and the breadth. You can only not see the height. Where in a space land, you can see the length, breadth, and the height. We are asking, the Puranas describe length, breadth, and height. Where is the remaining length, breadth, and height? We are not asking about another dimension. That is where I think either Siddharthi has completely misunderstood what is an hyperdimension. So, Naren, if you want to elaborate further, we can elaborate, but hope I am clear where Siddharthi is missing, because we are clearly asking him about the length, breadth, and height, and we are asking where is the remaining length and breadth and height, and he is coming and saying hyperdimension. We are not asking about hyperdimension. We are asking about the length, breadth, and height, which is in the 3 dimension.
Actually, guys, I'm so enjoying this particular session because, honestly speaking, I didn't say this so far, but the thing that I really liked about the debate was the cryptic way in which it was done. Actually, because of time constraints on request from ISKCON and the cut down on the rebuttals, you guys didn't have the opportunity to explain what is meant. So you mentioned in your rebuttal, Jerry, regarding the length, breadth, and height, and I was, honestly speaking, me and I'm sure the rest of the audience were wondering as to what are you referring to? What do you mean by that? What do you mean? Siddharth suddenly came up and mentioned about the flatlands and somebody looking up, right, left, and also I was wondering, what are you guys talking about, and where does it fit in? So Jerry, thanks again for that detailed elaboration, and that really put my mind to rest. And again, for the audience, I'm repeating this is not meant to misrepresent in any way, and feel free to comment, and if required, we can have another session too, because this is so interesting, and I learned so much about the Puranas and the way the worldviews are getting interpreted. So please, everyone, look at it in the interpretation from the academical perspective. and this is not meant to put down anyone or anybody's thoughts, feelings, or understandings. So, Jerry, does this so when he's talking about hyperdimension, then he mentioned about hidden worlds in response to one of your queries. So, is interconnected, this hyperdimension and hidden worlds, and okay, one more question, Jerry. Adding to that is that so are you essentially saying that there is no like a reference to hyperdimension or hidden worlds in the Puranas? And I've not read them, so I don't know. So I'm asking.
So
Over to you.
there is absolutely no reference to hyperdimension at all.
What about the
Yeah.
hidden world? So how does it tie in the hidden worlds thing?
So hidden world. See, if he is speaking about invisible world, if that is what he
Yes.
meant, then I also don't have a problem with
I think that was in the Q&A where he mentioned about the hidden worlds, and he said, okay, this is in the hidden world, and
Yeah.
scientists have accepted hidden worlds, and so whatever you are saying about so many stories in the Puranas which seem like what are these people talking about, like the sun on a chariot and stuff, so and the moon made of nectar and curd and stuff like that. So he mentioned about hidden worlds, that is unseen worlds. So how does this fit into the hyperdimension construct?
So let me explain that in two parts. One, I don't have a problem with the hidden world at all. What I have a problem is applying that to the Puranas. I don't have problem in saying that the Puranas also have hidden world, but I have a problem in again coming back to just to stay on the same point, coming back to the Earth's circumference. Whether the remaining length and breadth, let us assume, is hidden, but if it is 6 billion kilometers, it will affect the gravity. That is what we are trying to say. Whether it is hidden, length and breadth, let us assume for the argument's sake that is hidden, because Puranas doesn't mention it as hidden. But for the argument's sake, let us mention it as hidden, not hyperdimension now. Hidden length and breadth. Even if it is somehow hidden, it will not tally because the Earth's gravity with the measurement that we have, not the 6 billion kilometers. If Earth has 6 billion kilometer circumference of the Earth, then we will collapse and the life will not have been possible. Now, coming to the very specific point that you had mentioned, especially when you spoke about the Chandraloka and the moon, you mentioned about the moon. See, there is no difference between the Chandraloka and the moon. That is what I was trying to explain in the conclusion part. When the Purana speaks about the eclipses, are they speaking about the Chandraloka? They are speaking about the Chandraloka. Now the eclipses, does it happen in the Chandraloka or moon? Yes, it happens in the moon, it happens in the Chandraloka. Chandraloka equals to moon. It is just the translation. Moon in English is Chandraloka in Sanskrit. So we speak about the same moon because we speak about the same eclipses. We speak about the same waxing and waning because we speak about the same word in two different languages. These are not two different words. Siddharthi was trying to make it as two different words. It is absolutely not two different words. In fact, if it is two different words, why would Srila Prabhupada go on denying the moon landing? Didn't he know that this was in a different world at all? In fact, I am not saying, I am not lying. Actually, we can have a separate episode also, or separate video recording in other venues also. I have around 55 pages of Srila Prabhupada denying the moon landing in each and every commentary. Did he not know that this was a hidden world? Did he not know that the Chandraloka was different from the moon? There is no way of denying the Chandra, that Loka that we see, the moon that we see is the same moon. It is not hidden. It is exactly the same moon that is mentioned in the Bhagavad Purana and the other Puranas, except that now we know that there are no nectars available in the moon, and hence he comes up with a hidden description. But if I have to go on explaining the Chandraloka, as I said, I have at least 50 pages, only quotes, and there are other scholars who have done that. I have actually taken their references also. Only quotes of Srila Prabhupada explaining from Bhagavad Gita and Purana and denying the moon landing. Did he not know that it was a hidden world? Hidden world is a explanation that he comes up which doesn't tally with the description at all, and neither with his guru.
That's a good point, Jerry. That's a good point, and I really hope that Siddharth comes back with some finer, as you rightly said it in the beginning, that comes back with some more well-read references and supporting literature to his theories, which really sounds very interesting, and I really want to see where this goes. Maybe there is a new angle. It's very well possible, Jerry, that he might have come up with something that, or stumbled on something that was never seen by the earlier scholars. So it cannot be dismissed just on the lines that it was not seen by any other scholars of the past. But what would really be of significance is how it tallies or harmonizes with the other verses of the Puranas and his own gurus, how they have seen this. Because as he rightly said, the Srila Prabhupada was his own teacher, highly respected, and the founder of ISKCON in itself. So one thing I also observed is very surprisingly that none of the points that you made in your presentation was refuted by Siddharth. It could be that because of the paucity of time. So I really hope Siddharth comes back with a part 2 of the debate, or any of the Hindu scholars would want to have a part 2 of this debate to carry forward. I'll be more than happy, because I'm really interested in learning of how things are working in the Hindu worldview. So that'll really be interesting. So I don't know whether I can request you guys, Praveen, Jerry, can you just quickly, like in 2-3 minutes, just summarize those questions that you had raised, some 15-16 questions as I remember you had raised. So can you quickly summarize it out for the sake of our audience again?
Yeah. We can definitely do that. Say, for example, we began with the question number 1 was on the order. Bhagavad Purana, book 5, chapter 22 was on the order. Order being given the description in the Virat Rupa: earth, sun, moon, stars, Venus, and it goes on like that. So we were asking the order that is given as per the science is Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. How do you tally this order? Because these are 2 different orders, cannot be reconciled. Question number 2 was on the distance that is given. For example, stars are closer to moon than Venus, whereas we all know that the moon and the Venus is part of the solar system, so they would be definitely closer than moon would be definitely closer to Venus than to the stars. And we had pointed out the question that was only because the moon and the stars are married as per the Puranas. And then we had also mentioned the third question is that Siddharthi went on to explain, which I had already covered, the Brahmanda is only the solar system, wherein we asked the question, if Brahmanda is only the solar system, how come there are descriptions of 27 constellations of stars in the Brahmanda? And the fourth question was Siddharthi, the Puranas very clearly says that one is above the other. It makes perfect sense in the Virat Rupa, because Virat Rupa, like body anatomy, the earth is in the stomach, and one is above the other. See, the moon is above, the sun is above, and above the sun is the moon. But in a flat universe, which is the scientific universe, this description doesn't fit. If it is a scientific description, and it is given as a scientific description, as Praveen rightly mentioned, Puranas claim it to be scientific description. If it is just a casual observation, we are fine with it. But since it is, how can this direction be right? And we are also mentioned again the Puranas, the reasons given for eclipses. Of course, the reasons for eclipses makes perfect sense, because within the Purana, because the moon is above the sun, and hence their demon Rahu has to come and swallow the moon or the sun. But we know that that is not the right reason for the eclipses. The eclipses are the lunar eclipse. For example, the earth is obstructing the light from the sun, and we are asking whether the Rahu or the earth, which is the cause for the eclipses. And then we had asked about the whether it is the circumference of the earth is the 6 billion kilometers or 40,000 kilometers. And we had also raised about Siddharthi speaks about the hyperdimension for the earth, as I said, for the remaining part of the earth. The remaining part of the earth, the entire earth, the Puranic earth, is divided into 7 continents. How did it get into divided into 7 continents? Because of Priyavarta Maharaja's chariots created, with the chariots he created the 7 continents. The chariot wheels, that actually created the seas, the oceans and the continents. How can you divide hyperdimension by the wheel of the chariots was our another question. Again, we had question again regarding the hyperdimension. That was our 8th question, which speaks about the oceans. We said that the chariots had created continents and oceans, and these oceans are filled with, say, nectar, clarified butter, curd, all. And are you saying to me that the curd, of course, the salt lake, we know that it is not in hyperdimension because it is the ocean that we have, the salt ocean. Whereas the clarified butter, nectar, are you saying that all these are also hyperdimensions? And then our other question was definitely on the moon landing, because as per the very clearly Prabhupada quoted Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavad Purana and said that it is not possible to land in moon, because Bhagavad Gita very clearly teaches us that one can go to the moon only because of the pious karmas and worshipping ancestors. Yeah, the karma theory will go for a toss if people landed in the moon. That is why he was completely denying it. So how would you explain the moon landing? Because that is now established. And we had also asked the question like the movement of the, after the description of the planets, we had asked about the movement, because that was another scientific question. If the earth and everything is moving, scientifically, how does it explain? Newton explained it with the gravity. But we are asking, the Puranas explained with the chariots and the horses. And there we raise the question, why doesn't the earth have a chariot? Because the earth also, we know that it is moving. If the earth is moving, the others are given chariot. Why the poor earth is denied of the chariot? Then we understood actually that it is not that the earth doesn't move as per the Puranas, because the earth is stationary in the head of Ananda. It is stable in the head of Ananda. Hence we asked the question, shouldn't we, that was our 11th question, shouldn't we then call the entire system as serpent system, Ananda system, than the solar system, because it is the serpent Ananda that is giving the stability. Unlike the solar system where the sun's gravity is giving the stability in Earth in its orbit, here the serpent Ananda is giving the stability, hence it should be called as the serpent system. And then we had pointed out that what Praveen had mentioned initially, the Virat Rupa structure, if the Greeks also had very similar understanding, and Newton, Boyle and all, at the beginning of the modern science, they explicitly, not implicitly, they explicitly denied that such theories should be completely discarded. Otherwise, the physical laws can never be searched for. So we were asking, when Newton, in the principles of mathematical principles of the nature, when the classical book, he had explicitly in the conclusion denied. How can you then say that your view is scientific? We were saying, and then we had raised Robert Boyle's 3 questions, wherein he spoke about if nature is considered as divine, can we ever comprehend it? And the 14th question was, will it not be impious then to experiment with the nature, if nature is a Virat Rupa or the manifestation of God itself? And should we even attempt to control or modify or do anything with the nature at all? So in summary, very quickly, these were the 15 questions that we had.
Yeah, also
you.
Along with those 15 questions, Naren, we raised questions from geology, we raised questions from embryology. Had there been time, we could have raised more questions from the medicine and a lot more things actually. For example, something that he didn't even touch is the semen of Shiva. When Shiva ejaculated his semen, his sperm, it became the yellow part of his sperm became the gold, and the white part of his sperm became the silver on the earth. How can you explain that? Is that without Virat Rupa explanation, that is not possible, and even with Virat Rupa explanation, that is not scientific, right? So he didn't. Probably there was very less time for Siddharth to answer those questions, but those were very important questions. Something like Vaste Patala Mulaste Sheshaha, something that Jerry is pointing out all the time. On the head of this 1,000-head serpent, the earth stands still. So how can we explain that? The geology part of the Puranas is not unexplainable. It becomes very difficult for Siddharth to explain these things, and that's the reason he didn't attempt to answer these questions.
Wow, there's so much to learn, guys. So much, and I'm so enjoying, and I'm running short of time. So before we go any further, I'd like to again request to my viewers, to the viewers of this channel, to please post this link to your contacts, groups, and friends. There's so interesting, so much to learn, and we are. I'm so happy to see that like ironing out the rough parts of the debate that happened in a very cordial way, in a very respectable manner, with due open request to Siddharth and other Hindu scholars, in case they don't agree with the interpretation, to please do come for a part two, because I really want to hear the other side, as it's written in the Bible also. So we have to get into cordial discussion. It's such a beautiful country, such a big country, and there is so much to learn about and from each other on this. All right, guys. So from the
Naren,
yeah,
I know we are running short of time, and probably we'll have to wrap this up maybe in next 2 or 3 minutes. But let me make this point a little bit clear, because I think in the debate we couldn't make it very clear. When I asked, when Jerry asked the questions about Puranas, and when I have also asked the questions about Puranas to Siddharthji said I would consider Puranas as the deduction from, or something that the Supreme God Himself is revealing it to us, kind of truths, as if I'm going to. I went and asked my mother, who is my father, and he shows somebody and he says, "That's your father," and I just believe it. So I raised the question saying that when you go to Puranas, saying that the numbers that you calculated are, when Puranas shows those numbers and you take them literally and say, yes, these are not hyperdimensional, these are not extra dimensional, these are not spiritual, these are not some other world, these are actual numbers in the actual world. But why don't you take the same why don't you take the data that you, Jerry, and I are giving with the same standard of interpretation? Why, for example, the mountains having wings is taken in a different interpretation rather than your Puranas showing the truth, and you accept them the way it is? Why Chandra all of a sudden becomes Chandraloka, or why Chandraloka all of a sudden becomes something behind the Chandra or behind the moon that runs the moon? Why the chariots become some spiritual, and all of a sudden it is something that's behind the sun that's running the planet or the star called Earth? So if it is Virat Rupa, then it has to be like that. If you deny Virat Rupa, then what else are you left with? And there was another question that I raised, for which probably I need, when the question of Adam and Eve were brought in, we gave an explanation of miracle of God's work called creation, and Siddharth seemed to take the same route, saying that yes, miracles happen, and that's how we can also explain from Puranas. Just the way you interpret Bible, we also interpret Puranas, that God of the Puranas can do miracles. But this is where the problem is. The problem is the God of the Purana cannot be part of miracles, because he is not away from the creation itself, because creation is part of him. Anything that happens is part of God, including the hyperdimensional or hidden or unseen or whatever world you say. They must be part of God. They must be part of God's body. They must be part of God's existence or consciousness. If that is the case, nothing can be a miracle. It is just body of God. Whereas in the biblical context, what we have pointed out is God is both immanent and also transcendental to the creation. God is transcendental, and at the same time he is immanent. He can also participate in the creation that he created. That is the reason we claim to miracles. But that provision is not available for a pantheistic worldview called Puranic worldview, pantheistic or panentheistic worldview. So on a worldview level also, the questions that we raised probably were not addressed at all, because of the lack of time or because of the lack of, I don't know what it is, but they were not at all addressed.
Well, yeah, there is. Jerry.
Sorry, I'll have to just make one comment about Noah's Ark also, because that.
I'll come to that, Jerry. I'll come to that on this thing. There is the point that you picked up. I'll come to that. Yeah. So, okay, quickly, actually, just to add on or just mention, Siddharth, in the beginning of his presentation, he mentioned about one of the key criterion because on scientific research, which I agree with Siddharth, is the principle of falsifiability. So I would really like to understand from Siddharth that that's like a question is, if you're speaking about falsifiability, how does hidden worlds and hyperdimension fall in that criterion? Because these are not falsifiable, right? So, and if you're talking about I remember Siddharth saying that, how I go to my mother and ask who's my father, and she says, this guy is your father, I accept it. So this is the way that I even accept what is written. So in that case, there is no zeal for scientific understanding and trying to, harmonize reality with what is being told to us. So if when you're a child, my mother tells me 2 plus 2 equal 5, I might say yes, but as I grew up and I try to compare, and if my mother tells me 2 plus 2 equal 5, I'll tell my mother that it is not 5, it is 4, because this is how you do maths. So I believe Siddharth, being a data scientist, should look at even worldviews from that construct. All right. So coming to you guys, actually that's where I stopped you, Siddharth. Jerry, is with regards to Noah's Ark, because everyone felt, rather most of the people felt, that he didn't address the Noah's Ark question. I believe it was probably misunderstood. See, Siddharth did not ask whether it actually happened globally or not, because I believe the Matsya Avatar also points in that direction, if I'm not mistaken. His question was, how can we accommodate all the animals in the ark? You merely touched on the response, but personally speaking, and I believe the thing was not adequately answered. So would you like to have another go at that? And let's be as precise as possible to address this query. Yes, sure. Jerry, over to you.
As you rightly said, I probably misunderstood the question the first time. I was more answering about the global flood and the timeline, rather than actually whether the animals were fitting. If the animals, the question was understood as the animals were fitting. In fact, it has been addressed in the 2012 when reverted to Sakir Naik. Anybody can watch it. The answer that we gave, let me very briefly give. The ship, the Noah's Ark, had 3 decks. And if you calculate, the measurement is given in the Bible. If you calculate the total volume that can accommodate, it comes to say 13,096,000 cubic feet, which means it can hold more than say 1,25,000 sheep-sized animals, more than 1,25,000 sheep-sized animals. Now keep this calculation in mind. Anybody can calculate it. The total land animals in the earth is 25,000 fold.
You mean average species, right?
Yes.
Not the total numbers, you're talking about species, number of species, kinds.
Absolutely.
Kinds, rather. Yeah, that's a better word for me. Kinds.
So thanks for that, adding the clarity. And the average size of this species is a sheep. See, everything is not like giraffe, or everything is not like, say, elephant. People assume the elephant and giraffe. But the average size is the sheep size. 25,000 types of this sheep-sized animals can be easily fit into the ark. Easily fit with the dimension, because if you look at it, as I said, it can accommodate 1,25,000 sheep-sized animals, whereas we need to have only 25,000 types of animals. So if his question is, and as you rightly pointed, that was his question, whether the animals can be fit, yes. We don't need to take care of the animals in the oceans and the waters. We need to take care of the animals in the land, and those can be easily fit. And we had answered this question in response to Sakir Naik, but unfortunately, at that time, I was more in terms of dates and this thing, because that we mentioned about that, and I got carried away in that direction. But if it is about fitting, it can definitely.
Thank you, Jerry. That really puts my mind to rest, because that was really outstanding. All right, so let me just rewind this a bit, Jerry and Praveen, quickly. You keep going back to the moon, right? So why is the moon landing? That is also one of the key questions that you mentioned in your Q&A, the rapid fire Q&A across each other. Why is the moon landing such a big issue? Like even in this particular session also, you mentioned about moon a few times. So why is the moon landing and such a big issue for for ISKCON?
Narendra, it is not just for ISKCON, it is actually for the entire Hinduism moonlighting because it doesn't come nearly in the Puranas.
I never heard this argument. To be honest with you guys, I've never heard this argument. So I heard this
So,
partially in the debate, but I couldn't get my hands on it, my mind around it. So this is a good time. So Jerry, yeah, go ahead, please.
yeah, very briefly, see, Bhagavad Gita 9, chapter 9 very clearly says, those who can land in the moon are those people who are dead, who are worshipping the ancestors. When they were alive on the earth, they were worshipping the ancestors and when they were doing pious karma. Now you have to understand, moon is part of the Soraloka. Praveen very clearly recited the Sanskrit initially and said, moon comes in the chest part. So that is the Soraloka. Now you cannot go to the Soraloka, you cannot go to the heaven with a space shuttle. It is impossible. If tomorrow somebody says to Naren that you can go to heaven in the space shuttle, meet Jesus Christ and come back, and you say no, those who accept only Jesus Christ can go to heaven, then your entire theology has collapsed, right? So similarly, since in the Hindu concept, the moon is part of the heaven and the Soraloka, and only you can land in the moon with the karma and that too on the afterlife of after the death and the afterlife this because of your karma. And if people claim that they have gone to moon and come back, what happened to the karma theory? What happened to the concept of the heaven? What happens to the concept of reincarnation? Everything is in stake. That is why I said it has to be a separate episode because at least we can go line by line Bhagavad Purana, what Srila Prabhupada said, not what Praveen says or what Jerry says. What is important is what these gurus have said and why they have denied it. And when we understand, he understood the gravity. That is why he used a word, bogus. I would never use such words. But he said, if the moon landing is right, then we are all bogus. ISKCON is bogus. That is his quotation. So it is very important and that cannot be covered in 1 minute because as I said, he himself has written at least 50 pages in different interpretations to Bhagavad Purana. We have to go line by line to understand the seriousness of it. But I hope we are able to convey it in a very brief glance.
Yeah, we can take up more questions as the time permits in the future also. But since we are wrapping it up now,
really, we're really short of time. Really,
yeah, so
but just to be fair,
yes,
go
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, see, just to be fair, Jerry, I have to give you the comeback that Siddharth mentioned, and he said like, you might know my address. I live I live at so and so address, and you come to my building, but you don't know which floor I am. You don't know my room number. You'll still be searching. You are in the building, but you're still searching. So he said that Chandraloka and the moon are two separate things. So even though the moon landing happened, the Chandraloka landing has not happened. He said like it's probably like reaching to my building, but not reaching to my house. So that was the rebuttal response that Siddharth had given. So how would that tie? That's my last question because we really need to close. We are way over time. So over to you, Jerry.
Yeah, so as we said, Naren, there is no difference. If you look at the description of the Chandraloka in the Puranas, I'm not saying anything else. Description of the Chandraloka in the Puranas, where it speaks about the eclipses, where it speaks about the waning and waxing, where it speaks about the
So this is all references to Chandraloka only. There is no reference to another celestial body. It says Chandraloka. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely not. Yes, absolutely. What we can observe with our naked eyes is clearly described in the Puranas. The same moon. It is only that moon is an English word and this is a Sanskrit. That's all. Otherwise, what we see from here, the eclipses, the waning and waxing, everything is about the moon. Now, so there is no artificial difference. But with a good telescope, actually, you can see the entire moon. And if you lit a candle and keep it in the moon also, you can see it with the telescope. Now, they are having a trouble. They are having a trouble on how to explain the difference. So that I said, Naren would require more explanation from Srila Prabhupada's own words. But there is absolutely no difference between the Chandraloka and the moon. The moon that we use it in English is exactly the same Chandraloka that is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita.
Wow! I can somehow understand the impact and why it created so much ripples around in Hinduism and the scholars and so. So I really hope and look forward to more such cordial debates, more such cordial discussions, and I look forward to the next installment from Siddharth. And Siddharth, if you're watching this, I really hope that you get back to the team on when we can have the next debate on this. And if you, as I said earlier, if you want to have part 2 of this debate, we are more than looking forward to it. So I really need to wrap this up, guys. I really so much want to continue so many more questions, but I really appreciate. So thank you again, Praveen and Jerry, for coming back on the show to put forward your points, put forward your explanations, and we all look forward to hearing from Siddharth on this. So at this time, I even urge my viewers to please circulate this link, because the debate earlier caused so much discussions and comments, and this content needs to go out to the people. So please feel free to circulate the link, and thank you so much for being there and watching the show and staying up with us. Thank you again. Take care and God bless you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.